For me, the reason I'm with Zinzino, it comes down to three things. Number one, what works best in the clinic? Number two, what's the mission of the company? And number three, who are the people behind Zinzino and the people that are attracted to the company? And tonight, it is my incredible privilege to introduce you to Dr. Michael Lewis. Michael Lewis, MD, MPH, MBA, FACPM, FACN, is author of the Amazon bestseller When Brains Collide. What every athlete and parent should know about the prevention and treatment of concussions and head injuries. He's a globally sought expert consultant in holistic approaches to head injuries. He now is in private medical practice where he focuses on assessment, recovery, and education of traumatic brain injury, and is the head of the Brain Health Education and Research Institute, a nonprofit which he founded in 2011 when he retired at the rank of colonel after a 31-year career in the Army. Previously, Dr. Lewis was the director, Division of Epidemiology, Biostatistics at Uniformed Service University in Bethesda, where he served as an educator in epidemiology, tropical diseases, international public health, and executive medicine. Other assignments include the Department of Defense Global Emerging Infectious Surveillance Program, director at the AFRIMS Research Lab in Bangkok, Thailand, where he established a multi-million-dollar disease surveillance program across 8 countries in Asia with numerous civilian, governmental, and non-governmental organizations. A graduate of the U.S. Army Ranger and Airborne Schools, Dr. Lewis is a graduate of West Point and served for 5 years in infantry divisions in the United States and overseas prior to attending Tulane Medical School. Dr. Lewis is board certified in public health and preventative medicine and a fellow of the American College of Preventive Medicine and Nutrition. He received a master's degree in public health from the Johns Hopkins University and completed his residency at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, where he executed the ESSENCE program, the nation's first and largest syndrome-based disease outbreak recognition system that supports health departments around the world. So, Dr. Lewis, with your background for public health and public service, I thought we would start our conversation with you today here. Now, anybody who's following you, and I do, you posted this the other day, this letter, a white paper that was sent directly to the White House, to the Office of the President, the Honorable Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Honorable Assistant Secretary of Health, and the Honorable Secretary of Defense. You forwarded this and posted this on your group, and this is a look at the press release that came out March 19th. Could you please just walk us through this a little bit as an expert in public health and nutrition? Can you tell us what your response was when you finally saw this in the media?
Well, Stuart, I've been at this for almost 20 years now and trying to move the dial on the awareness for omega-3s. And one of the first people, when I first got into the idea of can we use omega-3s for traumatic brain injury, I literally went to the head of Defense Veteran Brain Injury Center and said, is anybody looking at this? And his answer was, no, why don't you? And I was like, because I don't really know anything about omega-3s and the biochemistry, and I'm not a neurologist. And I kept, but you're the only one asking the question. So I knew I had to go out and learn from the world's leading experts. And the one person that everybody always referred to was Dr. Artemis Simopoulos she's originally from Greece, a PhD researcher, and everybody, regardless of where they're from. I'm talking about, I got to know everybody and anybody in the omega-3 space, and everybody always referred and deferred to Artemis because she's just literally the grandmother, if you will, or the godmother of all of omega-3 research. So when this came out last week, it was huge, right? You've got the world's leading researcher on omega-3s for the last 30 years who is sounding the alarm on the dangerous amounts of omega-6 in our diet and the lack of omega-3s in the entire food supply. And it's huge. One of the things I always like to point out when back in 2002, actually, Dr. Simopoulos published an article and based on her research that showed that an omega-6 to 3 ratio that was 4 to 1 or better, 3 to 1, 2 to 1, so on, that was equated to a 70% decrease all-cause mortality. And then published, a couple of years later, that same ratio, that 4 to 1 or better, of omega-6 to omega-3. So she showed again 70%, not just all-cause mortality, but cardiovascular mortality. So for her 20 some years later, and I know she's not sitting still, she continues to work on this. For her to come out in this white paper and send it directly to the president, HHS, and DOD saying, we're talking about even a national security level concern because the amount of obesity, the amount of diabetes, we don't have enough young men and women to come into the armed forces who are healthy enough to even be in the armed forces. So it's a major problem.
So would you encourage, again, this every last Thursday of the month is targeted specifically for healthcare providers. Speaking to fellow physicians and colleagues that are either listening to this live or recording, how important do you rank testing your patient's omega-6, 3 balance and the omega-3 index in terms of what every physician, every healthcare provider can do for health in our country? How important of an issue is this?
Well, I'll tell you a story. So when I first started to get rolling on looking at omega-3s and brain injury, like I said, I didn't know any really much about it. So I had to learn from anybody who knew. And there was really only about 5 people that kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together across the world. People like Phil Calder in the UK, Joe Hibbelin at the NIH, Nick Bazan down in New Orleans, and of course Artemis Thermopolis. But being at the NIH, Joe Hibbelin's a psychiatrist. He was a captain of the public health service at the time. He's since retired. And we were getting to know each other because I wanted to learn from the best. And he one night said, well, if we could just draw blood on people before they commit suicide, we could answer a lot of questions. And I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that before? That's easy. And he looked at me like I was crazy, which might mean a bit since he was a psychiatrist, is a psychiatrist. And I had said, no, there's like 50, 70 million blood specimens down the road here in Silver Spring, Maryland, with all of DOD's data behind it. Every time you have blood drawn in the military, what's left over gets sent to this freezer in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. So we put together a study and looked at what is the real impact of a low omega-3 level. And it really doesn't get much more impactful than suicide.
We're going to show the paper in just 1 second, Doctor. Before we do that, I just wanted to just show this little pull quote from the white paper that Artemis Simopoulos sent to the White House and just point out, it says right there in the middle what Dr. Lewis just said: military readiness and cognitive resilience are threatened by poor fatty acid balance. The imbalance overstimulates the body's endocannabinoid system, worsening obesity, inflammation, and mental health disorders, especially in youth. This isn't just a health issue, it's a matter of national security. Cognitive function, resilience, our armed forces, children, and general population are compromised by dietary decisions that can and must be reversed. So you were so ahead of the curve when you published this paper in 2011. This was really the first time anyone had looked this at military suicide and the omega-3 connection. Is that correct? Were you really the leading?
It's the only study that I'm even aware of, even to this day. And so I got a lot of pushback from the military. I got asked basically by the head of research at the Uniform Services University, you want to continue this line of research, you need to go elsewhere. We will not support you. And I'm looking at suicide in the military, active duty military. We hear 22 veterans a day, but these are active duty military. So they were well documented suicides because there's always an investigation. And that omega-6 to 3 ratio of 4 to 1 or better that we talk about, well, what we found was it was 26 to 1 on average. And yet, even when we looked at this, we still found a 62% increased risk of suicide with low omega-3 levels. It was profound.
So interestingly enough, 2011 is also the year, if I understand correctly, that Zinzino had actually reached out to you in the same year that you published this paper, looking to collaborate with you back then. Is that correct?
It is, and it was probably as a result of the paper that caught their attention. And back then, Zinzino was, had been around for about almost 10 years at that point, and looking at what is it that they really wanted to get into. And they knew they wanted to be involved in nutrition and making the world a better place. And so what they did was they teamed up with a Norwegian scientist, Ola Edie, who had this concept like, why don't we test people for omega-3, omega-6 levels, but why don't we put together a better fish oil, if you will? And that's exactly what Ola Edie did. And he had reached out to me in 2011 asking me to collaborate with him on the development of these things that we now know as the balance concept, combining the balance test and the balance oil. And we'll get into that here in a couple of minutes of what exactly is the balance oil and what makes it so different, so much better. It's as it's often said, is it's not fish oil. It's more like oily fish and or a Mediterranean diet in a bottle. And that's what Ola Edie came up with, wanted my help. And for some reason, we didn't really connect until just this past year. And it was like, here's that concept I was trying to get you involved in. So when I saw it, I knew it immediately, and just like this is what I've been looking for. This is the team I've been looking for since I retired. Actually retired at the end of 2011 from the military because I got frustrated because the military just did not want to listen. In fact, was very actively throwing roadblocks in my way so I wouldn't be successful. So it took a Norwegian to actually get it all done. So, thank goodness that Ola Edie, persisted with that.
Well, the two questions we get the most from healthcare providers that are looking to join us here in Zinzino and changing the world, making the world a better place, like you always say, to follow you to do that. But before we get there, I just want to point out Dr. Lewis does have a book called When Brains Collide. We believe this is the seminal tome on omega-3 and traumatic brain injury. So that should be required reading for any of the doctors that are involved here. So please avail yourself of the book. But Dr. Lewis, what physicians really want to know is how did you get so comfortable with Zinzino as a physician, getting your patients and the people that are in your non-for-profit, the people that are following you with PTSD and traumatic brain injury, how did you get so comfortable with Zinzino? And number two, what kind of results are you seeing with the Zinzino protocols with your patients?
Well, it was really three steps or three light bulbs that had to come on for me. The first was I have every time I look at something, evaluate something, I always look at myself as patient number one. I mean, I grew up playing football and rugby and, jumping out of airplanes and doing crazy things that you do when you're young, and certainly had my share of concussions. And so I'm always patient number one. So I'm first light bulb that I had to get screwed in and turned on was, is this really good for me? Right? I'm patient number one. I always try everything first. And what I found was, even though I was taking the best quality fish oil concentrates available in the market in the US today, really around the world, I still tested 10 to 1 in my ratio. My omega-3 index was pretty high, but I still had a 10 to 1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. So that was Like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I started taking the products, and I got a little anxious. I wasn't going to wait 120 days, 4 months, like they say, and I had access to tests, not only the Zinzino test, but other company tests as well. And so, all right, well, let me do this. And I did the finger stick, and I went drip, 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 drip across two different tests, one Zinzino, one from another lab that we know well, and I sent them in at the same time with the same blood, literally right there. And the results came back exactly the same. So I had made me have much more comfort in the Zinzino that they know what they're doing than the Vitas Analytical Services in Oslo, who actually does the testing. So I, I'm all in on that. But what about the results? So my results came back. I was 10 to 1, and just about 45 days later, I came back, I was 3.5 to 1. So I was feeling, and the only thing I had done different was started to take the health protocol premium with the Zinzino balance oil, the prebiotic, and the multivitamin. That's really an immune enhancing supplement, and the nootropic based on saffron called Viva. But I also had sent off some other blood to get done, and my B12 levels were at the high end of normal, which is kind of where you want them. But the other thing I really noticed was my cholesterol, my total cholesterol dropped by 25 points from the previous time that I had it tested. So light bulb number one, it works for me, and I'm feeling better, and I'm seeing the results, and my numbers are showing the results. So that was light bulb number one. But then light bulb number two had to come on. Like, if it's good for me, shouldn't I be sharing the best products with my patients and with my family and friends? So that was the second light bulb that finally came on. So I started to share it. And what I found was that patients loved it. I mean, they, just started flocking to it and doing it and having similar results. And then the third light bulb. So now I've developed a customer base of around 80 to 90 customers. And what finally dawned on me, the third light bulb that finally came on to me, and I hope somebody listening doesn't take as long as I did to come to all these conclusions. I dragged this out, and I should have been boom, 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 should have been right up front. But the third light bulb is, wait a minute, if I can help 80 people, 80 customers, what if I could show 10 people how to help 80 customers? What if I could show 100 people how to help 80 customers? That's a lot of people. That's how you change the world. Seeing one patient at a time is not easy, and I admire people that do it, love it, do it for an entire career. But I got into public health because I wanted to deal at the population level. How do I help people by the thousands, by the millions? And so the Zinzino mission literally fits right into my training and what I've been trying to do for the last 20, 30 years.
Now, you've since gotten to know the science advisory team, the chief science officer, the chief product officer, the scientist that runs the independent laboratory. But with your background, not only in public health, but also in the nutrition industry, you were recommending at one time, correct me if I'm wrong, the supplements made for NASA. I know that we had worked at Nordic Naturals. Like, you know the industry really well. At this point, can you share your logic that you had shared with me about being, brand agnostic? I mean, whatever works best for your patients at the best value, your ethos on that, doctor?
Well, it's, just like I want the best for myself and therefore the best for my family, I also want the best for my patients. Not only the best for my patients, but I'm always trying to see if I can decrease the pill count and the cost for my patients, because of course, if it's more affordable, more people are going to be, adherent to it. And so it achieves all of those things, plus an amazing scientific and research and development team behind it. And I'm honored, most people don't know this, but I'm honored to recently have been asked to be on their health and product advisory board. So I'm literally on an advisory board with these amazing scientists, both in Oslo that work directly for the company, but the chief science officer and the chief product development officer.
So the last question, then we're going to hand it back to Michael Varbeck to talk about the opportunity. Can you please just quickly go through the health protocol premium that everybody's looking at, just to quickly summarize why all four of these are foundational and why you recommend the protocol premium for your patients?
Absolutely. So I'll start at the bottom and work my way up. The Viva, and it says add the Viva. It's a saffron-based nootropic. It's basically helps calm the mind down. So if you're struggling with anxiety throughout the day, you take the Viva, either in the morning or throughout the day. If you have, but what most people find is it really helps them sleep better. And so a number of people, most people will take it in the evening, help calm that brain down so you can get to sleep. Support step number 3. That's the Zinzino Extend, or Extend Plus is the one that I like the best. It's a vegan version where it things like the vitamin C comes from acerola cherries as opposed to synthetic ascorbic acid. But it's not even called a multivitamin. It's a multi-immune food supplement, because that's what it does. We got beta glucans in it and other things that help support our immune system. So that's huge, right? Most everything, and I would argue brain injury is a summation of inflammation going on in the brain, for example, that never quite gets under control. So we've got to get that immune system functioning at its optimum so that we can get that inflammation under control. The Restore, jumping up to number 2, that's the Xenobiotic. That's a powder, a blend of a number of different fibers that are prebiotic, not probiotic. We already have the right bacteria in the gut, but we target the prebiotic fibers, we can help feed those good probiotics, those in the gut, and therefore they'll grow and push out the bad bacteria in our gut. And the result of it is, talking about getting our brain right, that gut brain connection I could go into for, a whole nother lecture, but it's huge. 95% of the serotonin and dopamine that swims around in our brain comes from the gut. And so what the prebiotic fiber, it helps, basically turns our gut, our large intestine, into a fermentation tank to make all these good things. And so that's huge. And then at the top, the balance oil. It's really it's the foundation of everything. Actually, you could argue that the xenobiotics is the foundation, but the balance oil, that combination, it answers one of the questions I've had for a dozen years. When we go through so much in the manufacturing process to concentrate the EPA and DHA, the omega-3s, why aren't we adding back in like astaxanthin and some of these other natural things that we get when we start off with the algae and accumulate through the food chain? And nobody's been able to answer that. And then here comes Zinzino and Ola Edie. He answered it, and it's not by adding astaxanthin, it's by adding in the amazing polyphenols that you get from good quality olives. So you get it from the land and you combine the two, and it's not the same. It's not like taking a shot of your olive oil to wash down your fish oil capsules. It's not the same. Our stomach can't make that connection. This is done at the molecular level, where you've got the omega-3s and they're wrapped in a protective layer called a liposome with the polyphenols at the molecular level. And that allows our omega-3s from the balance oil to get in through the gut that we're fixing with the xenobiotic into the cell, where then the lysosomes give up the omega-3s to do their job. So what I'm finding is, I've had one patient, for example, a former NFL player, in 1 month on this protocol had a 75% decrease in his overall number on his symptom score, a 22 question symptom score that we do routinely. and he had in 1 month a 75% improvement. So I know it works. I'm seeing it with my patients. I'm all in. This is the best I've ever found.